a treat for you today. Mark Meuser was a candidate for Secretary of State a couple years ago, and we would follow him on social media, which was always fun. And we would laugh when he'd roll up to some address where he had 23 registered voters, and it was a 7-Eleven or a warehouse or something like that. Or he'd find people that had been voting for years who were dead. And it was just egregious what he was finding on the voter rolls. It was awful. Anyway, Mark is an election law expert. He's got a very thorough understanding of the election process in California and all over the nation, apparently. We'll hear more about that. He's a native Californian and a small business owner committed to fight for honest and fair elections, which we desperately need here. By age 15, he worked at a local restaurant, and by 21, he had bought his own pizza joint. He's quite a businessman. So while his restaurant was thriving, he started studying law, and he graduated with honors from the Oak Brook College of Law. From there, he opened the Mark Meuser Law Group, dedicated to helping small businesses navigate through California's complex regulatory process, which is kind of crazy. Now he has a pretty diverse civil litigation firm. And as of late, he's been of counsel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I had to ask him how you say that, actually. He's been of counsel to the Dhillon Law Group. And he's going to be flying right out after our presentation, he says, to Arizona, where he's joining the Trump legal team. Shenanigans in our president's reelection. With that, it brings me great pleasure to introduce Mark Meuser.
The year is 1776. That glorious document has been signed by our fellow patriots. George Washington stood in front of the troops, and he proclaimed the importance of this moment. George Washington had already driven the British out of Boston. And now the battle was forming in New York. Long Island, to be precise. And all of a sudden, what everybody thought was dawn was darkness. George Washington was surrounded. No hope. And over the course of a night, when a magical fog covered the Hudson Bay, George Washington was able to miraculously escape Long Island. And then he promptly lost there. And he then lost in White Plains. Then he lost at Fort Washington. And then he lost at Fort Lee. And that glorious dawn was not so glorious. As George Washington was being driven across the state of New Jersey, the legislators in Philadelphia were concerned that Philadelphia was next. But all of a sudden, on December 25th, George Washington went from defense to offense. And he attacked the British when and where they least expected it. 8 days later, the Battle of Trenton was fought. And all of a sudden, the British, who thought the rout and the war was over, realized that they had a battle on their hands. That happened in 1776. But what we all in this room seem to forget, that battle for independence did not begin on July 4th, 1776. And the battle for independence did not end on December 25th, 1776. The battle for independence began during the 7-Year War. And shortly after the 7-Year War, Great Britain decided that it was the American colonies that needed to pay for their protection and their security. And so the tyrants in Great Britain decided to pass the Stamp Act, a tax on speech. It was a tax on your ability to communicate your political ideas. Well, only the rich have to pay this tax. But it stopped New Jersey from communicating with Pennsylvania. It made it more expensive to buy your newspaper. It made it so that King George was profiting every time that you decided to exercise your right to speak. Well, we all know that idea did not go over very well. And you know, prior to the Stamp Act, I have not been able to find a single pamphlet that espoused the idea that Great Britain and the colonies needed to separate. It was about that time, I believe it was 1765, was the first time somebody put in paper the idea that maybe it was time that the colonists separate from Great Britain. 1765. It was 11 years later that they signed the Declaration of Independence. And it wasn't until 1783 that we actually signed the treaty with Great Britain. The battle for ideas is not overnight. Unfortunately, we all live in a TV generation where we think our problems can be solved in a 15-minute segment. That's not reality. That's not how politics works. That is not how the world works. We are in a battle for freedom and liberty here in California.
Amen.
We have a tyrant in California that makes King George look like he's in kindergarten. You know, King George, when this tax on speech didn't work, what did he do? They moved to the Townshend Acts, where they taxed commerce, where they prevented people from peaceably assembling and meeting to discuss what was going on in their local politics. After that didn't work, we all know about King George trying to take the arms in Concord. What is Gavin doing? Nothing different than what happened by King George 200 plus years ago. And just like there were patriots in the 1770s who stood up and said, enough is enough. I am going to do something. But here's the deal that most of us do not understand today. Did you know that in 1776, only 25% of the colonists were in favor of separation from Great Britain? 25%. 25% were against it. 50% did not care. They just wanted to live their lives. They were the middle. I don't care if the British or the Americans. I have my land. I have my family. I have my crops. Government, leave me alone. Want to try that again? Government, leave me alone. I got a stat for you. Last year, Gallup did a survey of the state of California. And in this survey, they found that 29% of Californians were on the right and would always vote right-leaning candidates. They then surveyed and found that 29% of the California was always on the left, and that's all they would do is support left-leaning candidates. Guess what they found? 42% in the middle. California is nowhere near the most liberal state in the United States of America. We have 42% in the middle who just don't care. But here's what you need to understand about that middle voter. They don't care about politics. They don't follow politics. They just want government to leave them alone. And what is Gavin Newsom not doing right now? They can't go to school. Their kids can't go to school. Their kids can't go to school, can't go to college. They can't play their sports. They can't go to work. They can't go on vacation. They can't travel. Government is not allowing them to just live their life. But here's another thing about those in the middle. Many of them do not make up their mind who they're voting for until the very last minute. Because many of them just want to be on the winning team. They want to go into the water cooler the next day and say, yeah, I voted for the winner. Which is why you see so many push polls that try to cause you to believe who is prevailing. They're push polls. They're push polls. They're only designed to push people in the middle to vote a certain way because they believe that will mean that they are going to vote for the middle. But what's going on in California is that there are many people who are smart enough to go, wait a second. These liberals are crazy. I can't support it. But I'm going to decline to state. My side is going to lose. I got something better to do today than go vote. How many people here remember me running for Secretary of State in 2018? Raise your hand. Thank you. How many people know how many votes I got in the state of California? 4.3 million votes. My opponent got 6+ million votes. But here's the deal. 8 million evangelical Christians in the state of California did not vote. Do you want me to say that number again? Okay. We are not losing in the state of California because we are in the minority. We are not losing in the state of California because we have terrible ideas. We are not losing in the state of California because of election fraud. We are losing in the state of California because we are not participating in the fight for our state.
That's right.
We are losing because we are allowing our voters to think that we have already lost. And because they believe that we have lost, they are not volunteering for our campaigns. They are not contributing to our campaigns. And then they are not participating and voting. Because why vote if your vote does not matter? There is more than enough people in the state of California that if we simply participated in the elections, I would be your Secretary of State of the state of California right now. I didn't lose because of 78 people registered to vote at a vacant lot in Malibu. I did not lose because of 29 people who registered to vote at a check cashing store. I did not vote because of the 19 people who were registered to vote at the Sacramento County Fairgrounds. Yes, those are terrible numbers. I lost because of the 8 million evangelical Christians who thought my vote does not matter, so why vote? We are losing in California because we are refusing to participate. We have Gavin Newsom, the tyrant, as our governor because we have 42% in the middle who are staying home on election day. If we want to prevail, we got to go back to that Revolutionary War. Yes, we had George Washington, the commander of our military. But did you know that when Congress was not in session, there were men like John Adams who would go from farm to farm getting wagon loads of supplies, whether it was horses, grain, pigs, and shipping it to George Washington so he could feed his men? Did you know Nathaniel Greene, at the end of the war, was the #2 general? When he was told to go down into South Carolina and defeat the British, he was given a commission, but no money, no men, no supplies. Before he could be commander-in-chief, he first had to be fundraiser-in-chief. He literally had to go from town to town and say, give me your militia. Give me that wagon load of supplies. Give me that herd of horses. Give me your powder. Before he could go and fight for their freedom, he first had to get their participation. We all like to think about George Washington and his daring feats of bravery. But we forget about what was going on behind the scenes, where those few individuals first had to go to that 50% and get them to participate with their time, their treasure, and their talent. They did not win the Revolutionary War because of George Washington and his 20,000 men. Because behind the scenes, there were hundreds and thousands of people going out there and getting that 50% to do something. To do something. We won when the realized that if they did not participate, they were going to lose their farms. Because they saw what happened down in Georgia. They saw what was happening in South Carolina. And now the farmers in North Carolina said, if I do not contribute this wagon load of hay, I might not only lose my wagon load of hay, I might lose my farm. We have an opportunity in California in 2020, 2022, 2024, 2026. Do not expect that we turn this state overnight. The battle for the minds and the hearts of Californians will take time. People in California are not stupid. Gavin Newsom may be stupid, but the people of California are not stupid. They just don't want the government dictating every aspect of their life. That is a message that they need to hear. That's a message that they want to hear. How many people here know of a surfer who likes the government to tell him what to do? California is known for its surf community. Let's go back. The miners of 1849, the 49ers, they came to California because they wanted the government to tell them what to do. Or how about after World War II, when we had this massive boom of people who fought in World War II who moved to the state of California? They did so because they wanted the government to tell them what to do. You know what? Those people who are moving here from Mexico and Latin America, they are moving here because they want the government to tell them what to do. You remember back in the 70s and 80s where people were moving to California from the Eastern Bloc countries? Remember the reason why they told us why they wanted to move here to the United States and California? It was always because they wanted the government to tell them what to do, right? I'm sure most of you here have had children, right? And you probably all remember them at age 2 and 3, where they would sit down and say, "Mommy, please tell me what to do." It's human nature to be free and independent. And Gavin Newsom is acting like a tyrant, and he's dictating which businesses can be open, who can go to school. How many people can listen to me speak today? Who can go to church? When you can visit the beach? Gavin Newsom is a tyrant. Now here's the deal. We got to do something. And earlier, I was told that everybody received a couple of these. You know how I mentioned that earlier I talked about how there's so many people who are not voting. Did you know that the Democrat Party has made it easier for those people in the middle to vote? They've made it easier for the 8 million evangelicals to vote. The Democrat Party has taken away all excuses for those 8 million evangelical people to vote. How's that? They've registered every one of them to vote when they got their driver's license. And they've mailed them all a ballot. Now we can sit here and cry about how bad the problem is about motor voter. And we can sit here and complain how poor our voter registration rolls are. Or we can stop and say, this is the playing field that we are dealt with, and we are going to play the game better than the other side. And so what we are going to do is we are going to go knock on the 100 doors of our neighbors. And we're going to carry our nice little voter guide with us. And we're going to carry our recall of Gavin Newsom petitions with us. And over these next 5 days, 20 doors a day for 5 days. 20 doors a day. Door. Hey, I'm your neighbor. You probably know that there's an election coming up here. Have you made up your mind of who you're voting for yet? I got a handy voter guide here put out by a group that I'm a part of. Would you like to look at it? By the way, what do you think of Gavin Newsom and how he's running California? Shut up, step back, and let him talk for 5 minutes. And then you hand them the recall and ask them to sign it. If they want, you pick up their ballot. And you go take it to the register of voters for them. If you knock on 20 doors, you are doing your part to make sure more people are participating in our elections. By going out there and getting 20 people a day for the next 5 days, you are being a leader. But Mark, I'm a leader. I sit on Facebook all day and I share Facebook posts or share tweets. You're talking in your echo chamber. You're talking in your echo chamber. You got to get out of your echo chamber if you want to make a difference. If Samuel Adams only talked to John Adams, would we have a revolution today? They had to communicate with people who did not think it was proper for the colonies to separate from Great Britain. They had to put their ideas in writing. Ideas that were novel, ideas that were unpopular. But as they sent their ideas to Philadelphia, to Richmond, to Boston, people started to open their eyes to the tyranny in Great Britain. And the madder King George got and the more tyrannical he became, the more people wise up. And that 1% became 5%, became 10%, became 25%, and a declaration of independence was signed. And then there were people who were willing to stand up and now fight for that declaration. But it started with a voice. We all want to be leaders. Now, over the last couple of weeks, I've had people reach out to me on social media and trying to complain about how bad Gavin Newsom is. I say, well, go recall him. I'll pray about that. David may have prayed about killing Goliath, but he still walked out onto the battlefield and swung the stone. And if you do not get out on the battlefield, who's God going to use? Right. I've had people say, well, I'll share it on social media. Great, thanks. But what are you doing in actually helping us get the signatures? You know, 90% of the work is being done by about 10% of the people. That's true. There is one Facebook group that has like 200,000 people in it. That's called Reopen California. If each one of those 200,000 people simply got 10 signatures, Gavin Newsom would be gone. People like to talk about their problems, but it's time to stop talking about it and start doing something about it. And the only way we can do something about it is not by looking to Washington, D.C. and saying, what's Trump doing today? Not by looking to Sacramento and saying, what is the California Republican Party doing about it? We have to pull out our calendar, our schedule, our Rolodex, and say, what am I doing about it? Who can I talk to today to make sure that they vote? Oh, look here. I got a church directory. Let me open it up to the A's. Andrew, have you voted yet? No? Can I send you a list of candidates that I'm supporting? Is there anything I could do to help you vote? I'll come by and pick up your ballot and get it in. Your vote matters. You know, and if you get Andrew to vote this week, he's much more likely to vote in 2 years from now and 4 years from now. The Democrats have gotten rid of every excuse that Andrew has to not vote. They've registered him to vote, whether he wanted it or not. And they've sent him a ballot, whether he wants it or not. And the question is, are you going to do something in this next week to make sure Andrew is able to vote? Stop looking at Jan. Jan will do it. Stop looking at Wendy. Wendy will do it. Oh, Peter's a great guy. You know, Peter is always going to do it. We can trust Peter to do it. No, it's up to us. We pretend that we're leaders because we come here to Jan's meeting. But what are we doing the other 29 days of the month? I know that there are some great people here who are working. And if you're one of the 10%, I'm not talking to you right now. But if you're in the 90%, what can you do over these next 6 days to save our republic? And then what can you do for the next 2 years to save our republic? And then what can you do for the next 4 years to save our republic? The battle for freedom and liberty in the American colonies was not overnight. That idea was germinated in 1765, and the peace treaty was not until 1783. But technically, the real peace treaty was not signed until after the War of 1813. Because Great Britain was always there ready to come back. And it wasn't until the Second War for Independence that Americans finally had the freedom from Great Britain. It's great to come to a meeting, to get encouraged, but it's time to stop coming to meetings to feel good about ourselves and our participation in our political process. It's time that we start taking measure of our own time, our treasure, and our talent, and seeing what we can do today to help get our state back. Thank you very much.